All right, we've got a few more people that will be coming in at, I'm sure, because we have more. We have about 40 who have RSVP'd, so we might get going so that we can make the most of the session. Just you would see coming in that I just wanted to remind everybody that the session will be recorded or is being recorded. And for those that don't know me, my name is Kellyanne Jolly and I'm the chair of Victoria Walks. Can I just remind everybody to mute while you're in? That would be great. And I just wanted to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we are all meeting around Victoria, and some of us may be in other parts of Australia today, to pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge some fellow board members. I know Emma Hamilton is joining us. I'm not sure, I can't see if she's on yet, but acknowledge Emma. Can't see on my screen. And also Shelley White, who is from Vic Health. As all of you should know, that Vic Health has been a wonderful supporter right from the word go of Victoria Walks, and Shelley in particular has always attended our events, so we really appreciate your support and continuing to come to our events, Shelley. And of course, welcome to everybody tonight. Oh, and also of course to our guest speaker, José Besselink, who we're all, I'm sure, extremely excited to hear José's presentation tonight. And it's just a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to have that. So welcome to our 4th virtual event for our official and corporate supporters and stakeholders. I can't believe this is our 4th event. Of course, with COVID, we did flip from having face-to-face to virtual. And of course, by having virtual, it's given us the opportunity to have access to wonderful speakers such as José, not only internationally, but local, having our minister last year speak to us, which was great. But also for our regional supporters. I understand we have people from Warrnambool online today and Bendigo and so forth, which is much more difficult to get to Melbourne to be able to attend these events. So it really does give everyone access to these events. And of course, the program plays a really important role for Victoria Walks in being able to continue to promote walking and walkable urban designs. By being a supporter, as many of you I know are repeats, come back year after year, and we really are grateful and that you are continuing to support not only Victoria Walks, but this area. Really does, as I said, give you exclusive access to experienced, inspirational speakers that you probably normally would not have had access or opportunity to not only hear from them, but to ask them questions, but also to share learnings and ideas from each other. So it really is an opportunity for you, and please take the time to be able to ask questions and engage with each other, and Ben will take you through that whole process in a moment. As you all know, Victoria Walks is really the only organisation in Victoria whose sole purpose is to really inspire and to facilitate more people to walk more often. And I think with our recent election results over the weekend for our federal election, I think it's a great opportunity, and walking is just becoming more and more important, not only for good health, but also for environment and climate change more and more, community, and of course the economy, not only for transportation, but also for walking for recreation. So it's a great opportunity for us to really capitalise on this interest in all of those benefits that walking brings to us. And I'm speaking to the converted here because everyone on board absolutely understands that. So I'm going to pass you over to Ben, who will then he's going to be speaking a little bit, just giving a bit of an update on Victoria Walks, and then of course handing you over to our guest speaker, José Besselink, for the remainder of our session until 6 o'clock. So Ben.
Thanks, Kellyanne. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to José. Thrilled to have you here. I'm just going to give a very short update on our work developing our ask for the election. Will go no more than 10 minutes. Won't take any questions. You can ask questions way after Jose's finished, or tomorrow or some other time, but just to give you a bit of an update. And apologies to some of what I'm going to say. Some of you who'd been at Smart Urban Futures might have seen some of this content last week, but for a key focus of our work, which has been led by Dwayne Burt and Steve Roddis, is really developing up our asks for our election in November. So I'll just go through that. Just background, you all know, Victoria Walks, our key objective really is increased walking participation and demonstrable investment in walking. So what I'll go through now in developing up our ask is we've done a community survey late last year. We've also surveyed councils, and then to briefly look at some examples of some of the work we're doing which is related to this. So I'll jump straight in. We conducted a survey on late last year, which was a representative panel of over 800 Victorians, 18 years old and older, across all Victoria, so rural and regional and metro. We also backed that up with a public survey that went out through stakeholders, and I know a lot of you put that out through your network, so thanks very much. There wasn't much difference between the samples in their responses, but when we release the data closer to the election, we'll make it clear where there was any differences. But really, quite clearly, people want to live in walkable neighbourhoods, and they want things like 20-minute neighbourhoods. Access to good public transport is really important. They want to reduce their dependency on cars, so live somewhere where they don't need a car as much. And no surprises after the election to know that one have a positive environmental impact by walking and riding and catching PT more. And those percentages are those who responded 4 out of 5 of importance. One of the things we wanted to look at in this rather complex little table here is around speed. And I think that really indicates, I think, how much our decision makers might be out of step with the Victorian community, because the first bar is 54% of respondents want safer speeds on main roads. They agree or strongly agree, and if you flip it the other way, only 15% disagreed with safer speeds on main roads. So that's something which is really important, and we know 75% of pedestrian fatalities are on the arterials in Melbourne, so it's not surprising. The majority want 40 km/h default on residential speeds, which will, I think, shock José, because that's in the Netherlands. That would be very fast in a lot of streets. But majority want 40k, and the bottom three are around 30 km/h. We've nearly got half want 30k speeds on shopping centres and around schools, which is really encouraging. And I think that's quite a big shift from when we started asking these sort of questions many years ago. Surprisingly, only 32% want 30k speeds on residential streets. So that will be an area of focus for us, is how we work with the community to see the importance of that. So the total sample was nearly 2,500. And it's really quite clear that, in their responses, people want, traffic calming. They want things like traffic lights to work for them so they can get to shops and schools and train stations and public transport. So that really came back very strongly. We asked questions around barriers, and of course a lot of this is not surprising, but that we know that 64% barriers, poorly maintained footpaths or having no footpaths, things like difficult to cross roads and car volume. So they're really rating highly, and the not enough shade is going to be, I think, increasingly more important, particularly in climate change. So street trees and shade is an important issue. The next bit we went to is we put a request out to councils in March. We put out to all councils in Victoria, asking them to identify walking projects that they had, if you like, on the books they were planning, or even shovel ready, just needed the money to do. And one of the reasons for this is when we've put up election asks in the past, it's often come back saying, well, we want actually concrete examples. So we put the call out to really get some concrete, pardon the pun, that's a concrete path, but a concrete example of walking projects. What came back, and this is from over half Victorian councils came back, over 300 projects, over $300 million worth of costed projects. And I think it's a little bit more since I created this table, but you can see there the top 4 around tourism, local access, local recreation, and better crossings. That's about 90% of all the projects are in these top 4. And what we did is also then break it down between metro and rural and regional councils. And I'm really glad Steve and Dwayne had the idea to do this, because you can see quite a distinct difference in the metro, particularly better crossings, which is not surprising, but that's really the high number 1. And then with rural and regional, it's tourism. And that doesn't surprise us, and it sort of gives us a little bit of comfort, because we know that walking tourism is really poorly understood, and tourism that promotes walking is not done very well in Victoria. Most of our tourism is like the experience of driving down the ocean road, or, you know, empty nest, middle class, semi-retired couples walking hand in hand through vineyards, but it's not aimed at the average Victorian. So the benefits of walking tourism are for local communities, because, you know, if people go and stay in an area for a week and do 3 or 4 walks while they're there, they'll spend their money in local businesses. It benefits the visitors, because visitors increasingly want to, you know, go and immerse themselves in nature, but also connect much deeper with the areas they go. And walking tourism can do that. And of course, it benefits locals, because if it's a good area for walking, they're more physically active. So we're looking at, you know, investment, and pointing out that if there's 150 million a year investment in community, not a cost, an investment, it would address these sort of things and more. So we haven't finalised what our asks will be, but it's likely to be something along this road. I'll just briefly touch on some other things we're doing, which is just around value-based messaging, as realising as an organisation we need to, you know, bring that, not just bring the community along, but get them to appreciate and celebrate what needs to be done, so people can see, well, if you invest in walking, what is it? And this is an image of from Maribyrnong, where Maribyrnong has, you know, basically nearly all their roads. I think the local might be 40k now, but really investing in that infrastructure and getting locals to talk about the impact on their community, that safer speeds on local streets where kids are out and about walking to school, it just makes sense. Another one that Darebin's done is, you know, this one was done in COVID, really stop rat running, but provide spaces that local community could congregate. And I think the trial is still there. They're looking at the impact, but getting locals to really come out and say, look, I can't imagine this park not being here. So really thinking about it in those sort of terms. Another one which we're about to release is in Moreland. You know, if you know, locals from the local residents network, you know, that, you know, if we make walking safer, more pleasant and convenient, you know, more people which will walk. So this is really exciting bit of work, which has been led by Jane Holroyd, who's on the in the meeting as well. And so we'll be looking at how we can do this more and work with councils. I think all those 3 examples are supporter councils. So thank you, supporter councils, and really appreciate the fantastic work you're doing. I'm just going to finish there with, just apart from thanks, is just to say that Dwayne and Steve will be sending out an email to all the 39 councils. We'll be looking for case studies that we could look to fit in with the asks, and possibly to use for media opportunities when we get closer to the election. So please look out in your email box for that, because it's the next plank in our developing our asks, and we'll hope to have them finalised probably late June to July. I just thought I'd give you that bit of update. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and go back, because it is now, sorry to rush through that, but I know you don't want to hear me talking. You want to hear José, because I certainly do. Because José's work, I think, is really inspiring. Not just her work, but what the City of Rotterdam's doing. José is an urban planner in public space and mobility. She was an initiator in getting Walk 21 to Rotterdam in 2019, which I was extremely fortunate to go to and present. And I've got to tell you, it's a bit maybe rude to say I was surprised, but I was surprised how much I loved walking in Rotterdam. In Australia, we hear a lot about things like Amsterdam, particularly a bit of Den Haag, The Hague, but I can tell you, Amsterdam for me is rubbish for walking. And when I got to Rotterdam, it was like eye-opening. It's a beautiful, glorious city with really wide streets, and you know, its central train station is just gobsmackingly stunning, and it has walking and cycling boulevards effectively leading to the station, complete opposite to what we do in a lot of our stations in Melbourne. But beyond that, Jose's leads an interdepartmental program team for walking. So really moving past the siloed aspect we often have in some of our councils, but looking at a whole of council, how they can do walking better. And that's really impressive. And I think Jose's work as a change maker is also inspiring to me. So I'm really thrilled when she agreed to present and lead a Q&A. So before I hand over to Jose, we'll have questions later. Please let Jose get through the question, but if you've got things put in the chat or raise your hand, we'll have a bit of a Q&A later when she's finished. But if I can now hand over to you, Jose, I will, please.
Thank you, Ben. And it's great that we have a Rotterdam ambassador in Australia as well. Sharing my screen. So my talk today is about the city of Rotterdam, but before I start on the city itself, I would like to share a personal note with you. This is the tunnel connecting, a pedestrian tunnel actually, connecting the north and the south bank of our city. It was the very first tunnel in the Netherlands. And a few years ago, we had an art manifestation in this tunnel, and it was called the Tunnel of Love. And to me and my family, it is literally the Tunnel of Love, because this is a picture of my grandparents, and they met walking in this tunnel. So I could even say that I owe my life to a pedestrian tunnel. And this is why I think it's just so much fun for me being an urban planner, writing the very first pedestrian policy of our city. So as Ben said, I've been working for the city as an urban planner for over 14 years now. I was involved in the city center development. And when I worked in that position, I figured, why don't we have a specific policy on walking? So my talk today will first start on this city center policies, and later I will just take you on a walk to Walk 21 and our walking policy. But first, share a bit of context with those of you who don't know Rotterdam. We are the second biggest city of the Netherlands. It's a port city. We have around 650 people living in the city and a 1.2 million in the wider region. And maybe, Ben, you said that you like walking in Rotterdam more than in Amsterdam. And it has something to do with this event in World War II. Rotterdam was bombed, so all these narrow streets were vanished, and the city center had to be rebuilt from scratch. And I think this is one of the reasons why now our city is built with wider roads, and we often have groups from abroad over to the Netherlands, and they mainly see Rotterdam as a city that is most comparable to their cities, because Amsterdam is more like an open-air museum. I'm from Rotterdam, and there's always a rivalry between those cities. So after World War II, the urban planners back then, they had to, they kind of had a blank canvas, and they were rebuilding from scratch this city center. And it happened, or it turned out that we had the city divided with the different functions. So there was an area to live, there was the area for shopping. So no function mix at all. And because of this, we are facing the car dominance in this city, and we also have had squares like in the bottom picture, kind of desolated streetscapes. After 6 o'clock, almost no one walked on the streets, and this was also because we didn't rebuild as much apartments and places for people to live in the city center. So the liveliness on the streets was not as compared in other city centers in the Netherlands. Then we had like a history in creating city center strategies. It started after the war, and every 10 years or so we were creating new policy documents. And in 2007, the city has invited Jan Gill. I believe he also has been of influence in Melbourne. And this was really a game changer. He showed us the importance of public life and public space. And his analysis has been like the founding layer of our policy that was implemented in 2008. And this is our inner city plan, City Lounge. And City Lounge is kind of the metaphor for a city center as a lounge of the city. This is the place where we want people to feel comfortable and to just meet other people and to just enjoy the city. So City Lounge was a concept in everything we were doing in like adding more green, in creating attractive places for people, but also in building new residential areas. This City Lounge concept was like the main thread in everything we did. And this is key in the success of the development. So since 2000, we have seen a densification. Because of this densification, a 25% increase of the number of inhabitants in the city center. And this really helps in creating a more lively area in this neighborhood. The left picture, by the way, is the office of the municipality, and a combination with a hotel and condos. And I have been working there for, well, a long period now. But the thing is, with these high-rise buildings, we do not really connect to the city. So I prefer myself to work on other locations and to just have the possibility to go out for a walk during lunch, because when you're in the top floor of this building, it takes a lot of time to get down and go out for a walk. This is the central station where Ben was referring to, and before there wasn't like a as you see here in this image, where people are walking out of the central station into the city center, where there's terraces. Before that, this was a car-dominated area. There were the trams were there. It was a really busy area and not a very safe area to walk. So creating and building a new central station, it wasn't only about the building itself. It is about an area development, connecting this specific building and this neighborhood to the city center. And this has been very important success factor. The city has this image of being a modern architectural city. So we have these iconic buildings. And the one on the right, it's the depot building of our museum with a rooftop park. It was opened last year. And to Rotterdam, these type of iconic buildings are very important also in attracting, well, a certain group of people that really likes to live in the city, but also it relates to tourism, obviously. The point is that, of course, on these images of the city, we show that we are very good at architecture, but it's not about buildings, it's about people. So besides these densification strategy, as I said, this city lounge concept was also about creating attractive places for people. So adding more green, adding more benches, so people could have a drink or a chat without paying for a cup of coffee on a terrace. It's also about these public spaces. And public space is meant for people, not for cars. So we have also introduced a strategy related to park and walk facilities. So we have developed parking garages on the outskirts of the city center, which enabled us to eliminate on-street car parking. So we've had a target of removing 3,000 on-street car parkings. And so far we've made it up until 2,000. And these type of areas really helped on that. And I mean, this is the waterfront. This is our recreational landscape. This is important for the, well, this is the city, actually. This is the waterfront. We need to create attractive places for people on the waterfront. So these type of investments, the city has made a lot of these type of investments over the past decade or so. And it wasn't only these huge projects, but also smaller things like pocket parks. This is a nice example where we have added green, but also a poster on the wall of this building to create this green feeling. And if you create places like this, people will show up, and this is what happened in our city. So 2008, we have implemented this city lounge policy, and in the meantime, the city still is a car dominant city, but it has changed towards a more creative city for people. And I think this is a positive thing that we can build on for the future, but we are not there yet. I mean, building all these new well, buildings, it also gives more pressure on public space. We have to deal with redesigning our streets and making space for bicycle parking, or for example, these type of electric vehicles. We are facing challenges with climate change and air quality. There is still a huge urgency to pay more attention to people, and not only in the city center, but on a citywide scale. So this is why we've started to develop new policies, and those policies, they relate to creating a more healthy and attractive city. So these are a few examples. This is the Rotterdam mobility approach that we've implemented in 2019. Then we have a vision on public space. We have a local health agreement that relates more to health prevention. And then there's policies on road safety, on cycling, and finally on walking as well. And key is, as we have seen with the city lounge concept, that we need policy as a framework to push things forward. And very important in this is this paradigm shift that we've seen occurring and that is now also implemented in our policy documents from a car dominance towards a more people-centered approach where we put pedestrians and cyclists on top of the pyramid. And I'm very pleased that we have now finally implemented this in our policy documents. And the next step is to also translate this policy to actual projects in the city. So what really helped us was hosting the Walk 21 conference. So in that period when I worked in the city center, you've seen the pictures. We have done a lot of investments and we did redesign a lot of streets. But this was because of this city lounge concept. But on a city-wide scale, we didn't have any policy document that related to walking and to the pedestrian. So this is when I met Jim Walker, and I figured if we could make it happen to host this conference, we need to work on this topic and we could set the agenda on walking. And well, that's what happened. So this is our vice mayor on mobility, and she signed the International Charter for Walking after the conference. And we, during this conference, were able to, on one hand, showcase our city, to show the good examples that we have already realized. And on the other hand, we were able to gather more knowledge ourselves and, more important, to create like more awareness within the organization of our own municipality among my own colleagues about the importance of walking. So to give you an even better impression about our city, I would like now to share a video. It was actually the opening video of the Walk 21 conference. After these images that I've shared with you, to now also see it yourself with this footage.
Welcome to Rotterdam, the second biggest city of the Netherlands. Rotterdam keeps growing. To keep Rotterdam healthy and attractive, we create more and more space for people by putting pedestrians first. Because a walkable city is a healthy city.
Mijn naam is Matthijs van der Poel. Ik ben huisarts in Rotterdam-West. En sinds 2,5 jaar wandelen we 2 keer in de week met onze patiënten. Wandelen is echt de leukste stap naar een gezonder leven. We proberen met het looprecept onze patiënten meer aan het bewegen te krijgen, meer bewustwording te creëren, meer sociale contacten.
Ik loop al een paar maanden naar de huisarts. En het gaat goed. Ik merk het aan mijn gewicht. Het is goed voor je gezondheid. En gezellig, want we kletsen met elkaar tijdens het lopen. Hij geeft ons echt een push.
During the past 15 years, Rotterdam invested heavily in public space. The central station and its surroundings have been transformed into an open walking gateway to the city centre. The Colosseum becomes a broad city boulevard with more space for walking. But we are not there yet. Like all big and growing cities, Rotterdam faces many challenges. In the city, we take temporary measures to explore and experiment with the city of the future. We create parklets for leisure and bike parking. We transform parking spaces into green zones, because a walkable city is also a smart city.
Nou, we zijn hier op Stationsplein in Rotterdam, omdat we hier willen gaan onderzoeken het gedrag van de voetganger is en omdat we graag de veiligheid willen verbeteren. Er zijn boodschappen op straat aangebracht waarop de voetgangers en fietsers attenderen om contact met elkaar te maken, wat hopelijk leidt tot een veiligere oversteek. Verder willen we onderzoeken of we ze kunnen leiden naar een smallere zebrapad. Om te kijken of de smallere oversteek dus de verkeersveiligheid verbetert.
A walkable city is a city for everyone, no matter what age, background, or physical condition. So ours professionals take to the streets with residents to see how they experience their surroundings in terms of well-being. We stimulate initiatives to make people move and walk, like Walkable Neighborhood.
Ik ben ondersteun van Humanitas, maar eigenlijk ben ik vader in de wijk. Het meest belangrijkste punt, ouders. Waar zijn de ouders? Kom naar buiten. De KI heeft nog wat betekend in de wijk. Binnenkort we gaan starten met lopen in de wijk. Echt groepen vrouwen. Ze gaan hierheen vanavond bloem oplopen tot het park. Wij luisteren graag naar die wijk. Wij luisteren graag naar die mensen. Hoe gaan wij bewegen? Hoe gaan wij met onze kinderen? En dan komt het idee, was een vrouw hier aan de wonen, een vrouw. Ik zeg, ja, hoe gaan wij gewoon wandelen lopen? Nou, ik zeg, ga maar starten. Ik ga je besteunen. Ik ben ondersteun in de wijk. En ze gaat binnenkort starten. Zo begint eigenlijk. Straks wordt reclame mond in de mond. Wordt er straks drukken.
The Netherlands generally has been a little bit lazy about thinking about the pedestrian. They've been so successful with the bicycle that I think they've kept their focus on that. But actually, more people are walking and cycling, believe it or not. And so the departments of FD, thinking about the environment, people about planning and mobility, they're all coming together and really understanding how if we can invest in making Rotterdam a more walkable city, we're actually making it better for all of the priorities for what the city wants to achieve.
So, let's walk the talk together in Rotterdam. Learn, inspire, and discover Rotterdam as a walkable city.
So, after hosting this conference, okay, again, after hosting the conference, I was no longer myself, because in the beginning, I felt like being a lobbyist within my own organization. And after the conference, people, not only my colleagues, but also the vice mayor, the directors, they were all aware of the importance of walking. And we were able to create an interdepartmental program team. And I think this is very important to mention. I myself, I'm an urban planner. I collaborate with colleagues of the mobility department, and mostly the pedestrian is approached from a mobility perspective. But as you've also seen in this video, we truly think that it's important to also connect it to health, to accessibility, to sports, road safety, and maintenance. So we have a program team with a coordinator and people, colleagues, representatives of these different departments. And even within the Netherlands, this is quite unique. So we are in a way also piloting and pioneering on how to do this, since we are used to work in these silos. But we were able to well, get together and gather together all this knowledge that we have ourselves and from the city to create this ambition document in putting the pedestrian on a pedestal. And the main objectives are to create a walking culture, to make people more aware of the possibilities of walking, that it's the most easy and accessible way of getting your exercise, and also to change this model split, especially for those who tend to ride their cars for short distances. We try to stimulate people to rather walk or cycle. So now I would like to dive into this document and share with you the objectives and the different projects that we are conducting from ambition to action. So these objectives were translated in two main pillars of the vision. On the one hand, it's about creating a healthy city for both our residents as well as a healthy environment, an active environment that stimulates people to walk more. And the second pillar is related to accessibility and to creating like this 15-minute concept where people at least have the most important amenities like a supermarket or their local doctor within a 50 minutes walking distance. And we our program coordinator, she helps us to also relate all these different projects together. And I'm going to share now for each track a few projects that we're working on. So first is Link and Place, and that relates to both, well, mostly the physical environment and the investments that we're doing in public space. But before we could do that, we decided to create a pedestrian network, because we were used, not only in Rotterdam, but I assume in your cities as well, we know everything about the car. We know a lot about public transit and cycling in the Netherlands. We have this network clear, we know where we can prioritize, but for the pedestrian, we knew nothing. I mean, there's the pavement, but how can we prioritize these different streets and how do they connect to each other? So this is our first attempt in creating a pedestrian network. And we're now in the midst of a process to also relate this network to the cycling network and to the network of the car and public transit. And it gets exciting when they all prioritize their network in the same street. And this is the point where we could have a proper conversation and to just talk to one another and focus on a specific area and decide with the integral team how to prioritize these different modalities in this specific street. Related to this network are the design principles. We do have a handbook for designing our public space in the city, but we've decided to also create more principles for our designers, our colleagues that design and redesign our streets, to just give them the right tools how to create this pedestrian-friendly streets. This is in Dutch, but it's 7 topics about accessibility, a comfortable street, road safety, social safety, a legible city, and an attractive and healthy indicators. And we are relating this to this street cross sections and also to define the width of the footpath that needs to be obstacle free. So we are in, as with this network, we are also in the midst of creating this handbook. And we are also collaborating in this with the national, on a national level, in a collaboration with other cities and knowledge networks. Besides these design principles and network, we have also defined a list of small or possible quick wins to create more and safe crossings and places for pedestrians to walk. So, for example, this desired line for the pedestrian to actually build this instead of just letting them cross the street here, which is quite dangerous sometimes. And it's not only about walking. We also collaborate with our colleagues of the cycling team. And in the Netherlands, if we reconstruct a street and if we are building a bicycle path, we never build a bicycle path on the pavement. This is always a bicycle path where we use a bit of the road that was a car, that was like a road for cars, and then transform it to a bicycle street. So this is, I think, very important. I see a lot of examples, not outside the Netherlands, where when I'm cycling in a city abroad, that I'm cycling on the pavement, and I think this is something we should learn from and try to avoid. Besides these investments in our physical environment, we also have implemented a program that relates more to the awareness and campaigning and promotion to make people more aware about the positive effects of walking, and also about the importance of accessibility. These examples, we need to try to avoid these situations. And also during roadworks, it's always the pedestrian and the cyclist that need to make a huge detour. And we still have a lot of work to do here, but in October in the Netherlands, we have a national week on accessibility, and we are now working on a campaign, a huge campaign, to create more awareness among our citizens, but also entrepreneurs, to make them more aware about the importance of accessible roads for our people walking there. Then there's this thing that we've called the walking meeting, and where we collaborate with entrepreneurs and with employers to stimulate their employees to walk more during working hours. So, for example, as I shared with you, the building that I work in, it's quite hard, but to go out for a walk during lunchtime. But I still think we need to stimulate that more. And this is in the area around Central Station, and a collaboration of businesses. They have created a few walks in this area, where it's very clear how to walk and also the amount of time that it takes you. So you can either choose for a 25-minute walk or a 40-minute walk, and you can focus on your meeting while you're walking. And this is possible for lunch, but of course also for your walking meetings. Then we have identified all the different walking groups that we have in our city. And the City of Rotterdam hosts the marathon, a yearly marathon in April every year. And the organization of the marathon, they also organize a walking challenge. So for the ones among us that are not able to run, everybody can walk. And these walking groups, the day before the marathon, they can also walk over the finish. And this just gives them a huge boost and stimulates them to walk even more. So this is all about this walking culture. And walking culture is important for our residents, but it also relates to tourism. So we have developed an app, the Rotterdam Routes app, and there's a lot of different types of routes in it, differing in length and also in type of content. So we have, for example, street art route or a more historical orientated routes, and also this also helps in promoting the walkable city. So then at last, I want to share a few slides about knowledge and research. We do know a lot about car mobility and also about the other types of transport, but on walking, we have a lack of data. And we are still working on that. But for example, during this COVID time, we have launched a map, digital map of the city where people could point hearts and broken hearts on the map for areas or streets or places that they liked and disliked. And this gave us some impression about how people experience walking. And I think this is one important thing to gather more knowledge on. And the other point that we are working on as well is the pedestrian flows. Unfortunately, we still don't have a lot of data on that, but we are now collaborating with on a national level to build a walkability monitor. And that will also help us to focus on specific areas where we want to do more counting. So now we do this more kind of ad hoc related to a specific project. But I would love to have more data that I can share with my colleagues when they are redesigning a street, and that they will know more about the pedestrian flows and also where do people tend to sit. And I was also inspired by your survey that shade, and we have different situation, I guess, in the Netherlands than you guys in Australia, but also here related to climate change. In summertime and to have more shady areas for people to rest, it's getting more and more important. So unfortunately, we do not have a lot of data yet, but this is also why we have installed our program, and now we can find more budget to create new projects on this. And this is this group of people where we collaborate with on a national level. It's cities, but also ministries and other type of organizations like knowledge and research companies and universities. And this is, we've also implemented a city deal together. So this really helps, again, also on a national level, to create more awareness and to set the agenda on walking on well, like on a national level and in collaboration. And I think this is very important. Then the last few slides, we try to relate our work to other projects, since we do have our own integral approach. And walking can be connected to almost every other project. And we try to emphasize the importance of pedestrian in all these different projects. And this is a very interesting and huge new investment program in our city, where the city council has a huge budget to invest in 8 different projects throughout the city to really transform these areas and to create a more attractive and green places for people. So we, from our Rotterdam Walks team, we also collaborate with these projects team to share our knowledge in their projects. And I would like to end with this specific project that I'm currently working on, where we try to find from a common ground and the common objectives of these different policy documents that we have implemented in the city related to active mobility, both walking and cycling, and health. We were approached by a local family doctor, and she's seeing a lot of her patients facing lifestyle-related problems. And we've started now a pilot where we collaborate both within the municipality with these different departments, as well as the local community, connecting again the silos, and not only on walking, but also with all the more local stakeholders. So I do work a lot with my colleague of the health department, and then we also have the colleagues that know the neighborhood way better than I do. And together we connect the overarching objectives that we have on a citywide level to the reality of this neighborhood. And we found as a common ground that green was the most important reason for people to go out for a walk. And this is an example where we try to connect a network of green places and organizations that are or parks that relate to green and that feel responsible for a map like this, and by that also linking people to these green networks that we have in this neighborhood. So this map is a means to get people walking. And this is the family doctor. This is the one that you've also saw in the video. He goes out for a walk with his patients every Thursday. And I know that not every doctor has the time for that, but we do try to create again this awareness among other people. And with this map, people will be stimulated to go out for a walk, but also communities, they are organizing themselves now activities that relate to this to this network. And we also raise more awareness for investment in public space. So they are now the right-hand picture. They are pointing out their desire line, and we are now talking with them to actually invest in this area. So this is my last slide. It speaks for itself. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, so that was absolutely wonderful. And you probably need to get your breath back. So I've got, had a bit of a technical problem, which happened. I think my camera got an emotional response to your Tunnel of Love story, which I found very emotional and moving. And for some reason, my camera stopped working. I couldn't get it working again, so I'm now on my phone. I couldn't get it working on Zoom, but it's working otherwise. That was absolutely brilliant, but I'm not going to talk too much. I've got some questions, but I'd like to throw it over to people if you want to put a question in the chat or raise your hand. And I can see there's a question from Jane to kick things off. Jose, Jane would love to know how long far the city's annual walk marathon is, how many people participate. Maybe it's 42 kilometres, or is it shorter? Thanks.
Sorry, I missed the first part of the question. Could you repeat it?
Yeah. That in the city's annual marathon, how far is it and how many people participate? Do they do the full 42 kilometres, or what do they do?
They do the 42 kilometers, but it will sum up over time. So they can walk a few kilometers every week, and if only by the end they have walked this 42.
Okay, thank you. Dwayne, you've got a question and you're on mute before you start.
Thank you. Really interesting presentation. Yeah, I've got a few questions I'd like to ask, but I'll ask the one that I think is going to be most interesting to most people, which is, how did you bring the community along with all the changes to the streets that involved sort of removing car spaces or reducing the amount of space for cars? How did you get community acceptance of that?
Well, part of our redesigning process is always to involve the local community. This is part of the standard procedure. But we have also figured, and you probably recognize this, that especially eliminating car parking is pretty difficult. So we decided to also do in specific areas, like these tactical interventions and temporary projects, for example, with parklets or well, temporary closing of streets to make people more aware of what their streets could look like. And this really helped.
Dwayne, you got another question?
I was interested, there was a lot of, both in the video and some of the examples you used, there was quite a few examples of people actually going out walking. So, you know, the GP walking with his patients, and the walking groups with women, the walking meetings, which was interesting and something I guess we try to encourage, but trying to resource that can be a challenge, in that, you know, you need someone to lead them. So I'm just wondering, does the city sort of fund people to organise walks and lead walks, or even inspire volunteering, or is it entirely reliant on volunteers, I guess?
Yeah, good question. I think it's some of both. Mainly relying on local and informal networks of people that are already walking. So we have our colleagues of the sports department, and they work in these neighborhoods, and they organize activities. But they also know, and they can identify these different groups in the community and just support them. So I think it's some of both, but the examples that you've seen, it's mainly relying on enthusiastic people that are well, trying to stimulate their community or their neighbors to join. And we as a municipality, with our program of Rotterdam Walks, we try to support these networks. So I think it's a collaboration. And we are relying ourselves on these networks because this is something that needs to come from the community itself, and we can only be supportive with this, but we can't force them from above to just go out for a walk. So, but it's a hard job, and it takes a long time also to know all these different networks and communities.
Yeah, so we've got I've got a bit of an echo. I've got my phone and my laptop, so sorry, I've got two things at once. Sorry. Try and take that out and see if that works. Very sorry about that. So absolutely love this presentation. This is from Rachel Gold, which is not. Sorry.
Hey, do you want me to jump in instead? It might be easier. Hi, everyone. Presentation's amazing. I just feel like I need to travel. I'm very close to you. So thank you very much for the inspiration. Throughout the presentation, I was really interested that climate change didn't come up at all. There's lots of focus on community, health, and just beautiful places that people want to be in. There was, of course, the mention of going to green places, which was great. So has this been intentional, or do you consider that focusing on these other areas of health and well-being, you'll get the natural byproduct of climate improvement?
Oh, I really think that's, I'm thankful that you're asking me, because I now know that I need to add more on this in the presentation, because we do actually think that this is very important. And we also collaborate with the colleagues working on our climate adaptation programs. since we now have more focus on the projects that we are currently running are more related to health and well-being, but climate adaptation and climate change is as important. So in the program itself, it is connected, and we do collaborate with them. But now you've asked me, I will mention it in my next presentation.
That's okay. If I could be really sneaky and ask one more question. You've got two different teams, a walking team and a cycling team. Do you ever come, I'm trying not to use a terminology which is, Australian, I was going to use the term fisticuffs. Do you ever get cross with each other and actually disagree with each other over sort of shared space environments, and how do you manage that?
Yeah, this is happening. This is the situation that we are dealing with, and within Rotterdam, maybe less than in cities like Utrecht or Amsterdam, where we have a huger amount of people cycling. So the tension on the streets is getting bigger. But I do think that we always start a good conversation with one another. And our team, the cycling team, is a team of colleagues that work for the mobility department. I myself actually am the only one working for both. I also joined the cycling team and the walking team. And this already helps because I speak both languages. And it's funny because when I'm with my colleagues of the walking team, they see me as the cyclist and the other way around. But I've already mentioned this to my manager, that I think that we should have more people than just me working in both teams, because then it won't be a combat between the two, but it is just a common thing to create an attractive street. And in the one street, it will be more focused on walking, and in the other one, it will be more focused on cycling. So in the end, it's all about having a good conversation.
Thank you so much.
I don't know if I think Ben's still having problems, so we might go to. I can see the question.
Here.
So, you're back, are you?
No,
Ben?
I just don't have a camera. That's all.
Oh, okay. It was just
gone,
perhaps Sean might want to ask his question. I was going, or do you want to do that, Ben?
Sean, do you want to ask? Or do you like me to ask?
I think it's a good one. It kind of links a little bit to what Rachel just asked.
Yeah, I will just do an observation. My comment about Amsterdam when I was there, it was really difficult for walking because it appeared to be a very aggressive kind of cycling culture. Even going across zebra crossings, you had to kind of jump out of the way of bikes a lot, sort of thing, which I know that the city was looking at. Well, actually, they needed to do a lot of catch up. And that was quite different, just my experience from both Utrecht and Rotterdam. So it was quite a relief to come from Amsterdam to then Utrecht and then Rotterdam. It felt a lot more comfortable. But I think that's the next question from Sean's, I think, is really relevant. Is here we have many pathways shared by cyclists and walkers. This can create a tension between cyclists and walkers. Considering the long history of cycling dominance in Rotterdam, is this an issue? And if so, how is it managed?
Yeah, it does relate a bit to the previous question. It is becoming a bigger issue since the amount of people cycling is growing. But since we have in the Netherlands in general separate bike lanes, it's not that much of a tension between walkers and cyclists, only on crossings, or for example, on this Koolsingel Boulevard, we've recently added a zebra crossing for pedestrians because there were too many people cycling there. So in some points it is a tension, and this is also why while we're now working on these design principles for walking, we combine this with the design principles for cycling, so that we immediately, from drawing on, start thinking from how do these two dance together, the walkers and the cyclists.
Thanks, José. I've got a question just about Lincoln Place, which we have our version here, which is movement in place, and most Australian states have it. And it's a lot better than what we had before. But often I just get concerned because I find that in a lot of it, and particularly when the state does things as compared to councils, when they look at Lincoln Place, I get worried because walkers always seem to be relegated just to place, not link, i.e. not the movement. So that, you know, make street shopping strips, you know, more of a place to slow it down for traffic. But we haven't got to the level where we're actually doing the movement of walkers to place. I was just wondering, what's the experience in Rotterdam in that way?
Well, that we do both, and the focus from a mobility perspective on walking is mainly my colleagues from the mobility department. They tend to think in movements, and we actually had to emphasize that for walkers, it's not only about walking from A to B, but also about staying and enjoying a place or lingering, or so to connect the important places in a network with the link and place. So it's very important to focus on both topics. And since pedestrian from a mobility perspective is different than how we approach it in our program now, where we also talk about people and how do people behave, and especially to the traffic engineers, this is quite hard sometimes to see this from this people perspective, and that we are not only talking about movements of people, but also about creating attractive places.
Good to hear. Thank you for that. Dwayne, you have your hand up there? Of taking your hand down. Oops, there we go. Dwayne, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. I'm just wondering, you may not be able to speak directly to this. I'm not exactly sure where you work in the scheme of things, but I'm assuming that Rotterdam has new suburbs being developed on the outskirts of the urban area. And I'm just wondering, we here in Australia, we have huge amount of trouble making those places walkable. They tend to be just entirely car dominated, and they're designed so that everything is driven, every trip is driven, and so that's, you know, how it works. I'm wondering how you make those new suburbs that are being developed on the outskirts of the city more walkable and less car dominated, I suppose.
Yeah, I do think there's a difference with planning in the Netherlands and in Australia, or examples that we know from the United States, that the suburbs in the Netherlands, they are more car dominant than the areas within the city boundaries, but also the suburbs are developed with from this 50-minute neighborhood perspective, and people are already used to ride a bicycle, for example. So this is common also in the suburbs. We do create a network of proper sidewalks. So I think this is not only about planning from a walking perspective, this is planning from a perspective of where to locate the important amenities and to connect these facilities to a proper network for both walkers and cyclists. And in the Netherlands, this is a thing that we go a long way on that. And I'm not sure if we can compare in this sense the situation in the Netherlands with your suburbs. An interesting example in the Netherlands, the city of Houten Houten. And this city was developed in the, I think, from the 70s on. And the urban planners, they decided to plan the city from a bicycle perspective. So they decided to create a network where it's faster to cycle from the neighborhood to the local shopping area instead of driving your car. You have to make a detour with your car, and cycling, it's possible to immediately access the local facilities. So if you have the possibility to start from scratch and to build a completely new neighborhood, these principles of walkable and cyclable neighborhoods connecting the most important local facilities, that's what an urban planner should do. And that's a mind shift, I guess.
Well, it's one of our ex-board members, once said, in Australia, housing is the last crop. So on the edge of cities, rather than where in Netherlands, we still have farming right next to cities, but in Australia, we keep planting houses, which of course have no longer benefit. Nancy, you've got your hand up there. You're on mute.
Yes, I was interested that you talked about making places attractive and green as a key way to get people out walking, and this is one of the things that was really highlighted in both the Victoria Walk study and in a study that we did here of people walking in our local suburb in Melbourne of Brunswick last year. And so I thought, can you give us any examples of how making places greener and nicer has got more people walking? Or maybe works in progress.
We have a program about adding more green in the city. Every vice mayor during his 4-year period has a target, and the last one, he had a target to add 20 acres more of green in the city. So this was like a huge new park, but also green on a local neighborhood level. I must admit that I do not have the exact numbers. The only thing we do know is that every time when we conduct a survey and asking people what makes you more willing to go out for a walk, that green is very important. So I don't now on top of my head have examples where we can show the figures that relate to the project, but we do know from more than one survey that green is a very important factor and indicator on this.
Thanks. I think we've probably got time for 2 more questions. We have 2 there. Rachel's got one, then Andrea. Rachel, you've asked, that's Rachel Goldsworthy, disruptions can be a real barrier for walking and cycling. I assume that means building and constructions and roads and that sort of stuff. Is this something which you've addressed at a policy level, and have you had any wins to help this conflict?
And by disruptions, you mean like...
Do you want to jump on, Rachel?
Yeah, Will, sorry about that. So disruptions primarily where you've got, and it may be slightly different in the context, but perhaps there's some works going on in public transport or road works going on, which changes the journey of that usual pathway. So my dog's coming to say hi. Yeah, so she also likes walking. So think about that idea of, you're quite familiar so far as your walking path or your cycling path, and then all of a sudden you're unfamiliar because that journey has changed as a result of a disruption that's going on.
Yeah. So for example, during roadworks, you mean, or yeah.
Exactly, good case study, yeah.
Yeah, this is one of these points that I'm trying to address also to our maintenance colleagues, that they need to pay more attention to this, and also that we try to make use of this momentum when people need to make a detour, and that they maybe even choose to go out and use their bicycle. But I do not have examples of that program yet. I do know of an example in the city of Utrecht, where they were rebuilding an important arterial road, and where it was hard for cars to connect there. And they were promoting people to use their bicycle, and they were handing out apples to the car drivers, and then sharing this narrative that, hey, it's quite healthy if you eat an apple, but also if you choose your bicycle over your car for the coming period, it might be easier to use your car, bicycle. So it's these type of examples, but I think we have a long way to go on this specific topic. Yeah.
Thank you. We've definitely got something in common there, so appreciate that.
Right. Yeah, so you made me think. I remember when I was in Utrecht, I saw there was a canal, which I think in the 60s was made into a 4-lane highway. And when I was there, it had just been made back into a canal. So fixing the damage. We're still making the damage. We haven't got to fixing our damage yet. But Andrea, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm interested in this. I've been trying to lobby our local council in regards to other facilities for walking along walking paths. For example, seats, drinking fountains, shady trees, but particularly seats I see. There's very few of them. And I was just, what Ben said about this movement and place, focusing on place for pedestrians and not moving, that really resonated with me. Because I see all this sort of walking facilities located in parks and shopping centres where people congregate, but they're not really facilitating movement. So, you know, I have health issues and need to sit, for example. And I notice when I talk about this to other people, they say, yeah, you know, it would help me to walk more if there were seats. And, you know, various other things like, you know, that can help the process of walking along walking networks. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with you that related to this place movement, benches are a very important factor in this. And in this design principle toolbox that we are developing, we are also adding this specific topic, and also try to create a standard related to different types of neighborhood. For example, a neighborhood where we know there's a lot of elderly people living there, that it's even more important to add more seating facilities along their route, for example, from their homes to the supermarket. So we're trying with our colleagues of the design and landscape department to also set this standard, maybe for a bench every other 300 meters or so, or maybe even less, to add more of these seating facilities on these routes. And we've also conducted a specific project on this with our colleagues of the maintenance department. Our landscape designers have defined specific routes throughout the city where we assume a lot of elderly people or vulnerable people are using these specific routes. So we have also mapped these routes in our GIS, Geographic Information System. And we have conducted a pilot project in one of these neighborhoods where we have first defined this route ourselves. then we went out for a walk with the local community, and they have also shared their experiences with us. And with this input and information, we could do some maintenance on the road, as well as adding benches on the specific places where they needed them. So this is an example on how we work on this topic.
Jose, that was absolutely fantastic. We might have to leave it there, and particularly because you haven't got a camera. Apologies for that. I'm going to pass back to Kellyanne to make some closing remarks. So Kellyanne.
Thanks, Ben. Look, thank you to everybody for your engagement, interaction, and great questions. And thanks so much, Jose, for your presentation. I think I did love the whole notion of, and just what it conjured up, the city lounge. I think that that whole issue of really what came through for me and what I'm hearing is that whole issue again and again, often we hear it in the rhetoric, is about putting people first. And that whole issue about people, it's not just about the buildings and everything else in the infrastructure, it's about the people. And even the responses to some of your questions that are coming from others, it's evident that that is really, you know, foremost in what you are now doing. I think the other thing that was really key too for me that I was hearing is the collaboration and that notion of that you know, and again, we often try that. We know it is important to have that interdepartmental working group. And again, that was coming through very clearly, not just that it was a group, but it actually is working, because you were talking about the landscape architect and so it's helping those other departments, I guess, to really better understand how walking is integral to all of those pieces, and you're learning, I guess, from each other. So for me, they were two, and you know, talking about policies and so forth, but they were really key things for me. And I think we're all grappling with this issue of measuring the evidence side, and one of the questions about how do we actually help measure the fact that what we are introducing is actually making a difference, and we're actually seeing more people engaged and walking. And I think that's one of those things that's still probably we're getting better at it, but probably still a work in progress. So so I just wanted to, on behalf of you know, all of us here, to thank you so much. I think many of us have got now Rotterdam right up there on our list of places to go into the future. So you're a wonderful ambassador, and I'm sure we'll be looking you up and noticing a few of those things as we go through the city. So congratulations on what you've been able to achieve as a city, and the fact that you've brought people with you, community, and planners and everyone within the city. So so all the best, and thank you so much, and thanks to everybody for your contribution tonight.
Thank you for having me, and please reach out if you have any more questions. We could get in touch to have a conversation by email.
Ben, is there a capacity to have contact details?
Yeah, if people just contact me.
Yeah, okay, that's the best way.
So thanks, Jose. Wonderful.
And thanks to Erica for helping to pull all this together to ensure that it all works, and to everybody else who's been involved in pulling it together. So thank you.
Thank you, and good night or good morning.
Yeah, it's a good start of my